You ever have one of those moments where everything in your life seems fine, normal even, until it suddenly isn't? That was me about to throw my husband, Daniel, a surprise birthday party. We'd been married for 10 years. 10 years of shared laughter, a few rough patches, and a home that felt warm and safe. Daniel was the perfect husband. Attentive, funny, loving. The kind of guy who still left notes on the fridge that said things like, "Don't forget to smile today." So when his birthday rolled around, I wanted to make it special. Something different. I decided to fly his parents in from Oregon and set up a big surprise dinner at our favorite Italian place. Everything was planned down to the second. The night before his birthday, I needed to confirm the dinner reservation. Daniel had been acting a little distant all week, but I chalked it up to work stress. He was a corporate lawyer, always buried in deadlines. I grabbed his phone from the nightstand while he was in the shower, intending to check his calendar to make sure he had no last-minute meetings. And that's when I saw it. A text notification from a name I didn't recognize. Sarah, home. Can't wait to celebrate tomorrow, love. My stomach twisted. My name is Emily, not Sarah. My first thought was that it was a work colleague or some kind of misunderstanding. But something about the word home made my skin prickle. I clicked the message thread. There were dozens of texts, pictures, videos. A woman I'd never seen before. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, calling Daniel daddy. My entire body went cold. I felt like I was sinking into the floor. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I scrolled up. They had plans. A birthday dinner for him. She had even sent him a picture of a cake their daughter had baked for him. A daughter I had never known existed. The water in the bathroom shut off. I barely had time to lock the phone and set it back before Daniel stepped out, towel around his waist, flashing me that easy smile. The same smile that suddenly felt like a stranger's. I forced myself to breathe. "Everything okay?" he asked, rubbing the towel through his hair. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, I lied. Just checking tomorrow's plans. I barely slept that night. My mind raced through every moment of the last 10 years. Every business trip. Every late night. Had it all been a lie? By morning I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I needed answers first. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I followed him. Daniel left for work at his usual time. I gave him a kiss goodbye like everything was fine, like I wasn't falling apart inside. Then as soon as he pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and tailed him. But he didn't go to work. He drove 45 minutes out of town to a quiet, suburban neighborhood I had never seen before. And then he pulled into a driveway. Their driveway. Sarah was waiting at the door, beaming. The little girl ran out, shouting, "Daddy?" And then he kissed her. Not the little girl. Sarah. Right there in broad daylight. Like he had nothing to hide. My world shattered in real time. I sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A sickening realization hit me like a freight train. He wasn't just cheating. He had a second family. A whole other life. And I had no idea. I could have driven home. I could have gone straight to a divorce lawyer or maybe a bar or anywhere but where I ended up next. Instead, I waited until he went inside, then got out of my car and walked up to the house. Sarah was still standing near the door when she saw me. She frowned, confused. "Can I help you?" she asked. I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my throat. My words barely came out. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm Emily." The name meant nothing to her. She just blinked. But then the little girl peeked from behind the door and my stomach dropped to my feet. She had my eyes. My exact eyes. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just Daniel's secret. It was mine too. And I had no idea why. Sarah's confused expression was the last thing I saw before the world tilted beneath me. My vision blurred, my breath caught in my throat, and suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was even standing on solid ground anymore. The little girl, Daniel's daughter, stared up at me with innocent curiosity, completely unaware that my entire life had just unraveled. Her eyes were wide, familiar. Too familiar. They weren't just like mine. They were mine. Sarah took a step forward, her protective instincts kicking in. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I could barely process the words. My mind was a chaotic storm, but one thing was clear. I had to keep my composure. At least for now. "I think we need to talk," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Sarah hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, as if she was worried about Daniel coming out. Then something flickered across her face. Curiosity, suspicion? Maybe both. She nodded. "Let's talk inside." The house smelled like vanilla and fresh laundry, like a home. Not a hotel room or a secret hideout. A real home filled with toys, framed pictures, and tiny sneakers by the door. This wasn't some fling. Daniel had built a life here. Sarah led me to the kitchen, pulling out a chair for me at the table. I don't mean to be rude, but who are you? I sat down, my legs feeling weak. I took a deep breath, knowing that every single word I spoke now mattered. I'm Daniel's wife. Her face went blank. Silence. For a moment, I thought maybe she didn't hear me, or maybe she didn't understand. But then her expression changed. The color drained from her face, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Wife? She echoed, barely above a whisper. I nodded. She blinked rapidly, like her brain was rejecting the information, like it didn't fit into the world she knew. No, that's not possible. Daniel isn't married. I let out a humorless laugh. I thought the same thing about this. Tears welled up in her eyes, and suddenly, I felt something strange. Sympathy. She wasn't the villain in this. She had no idea. I pulled out my phone, opened my wedding photos, and placed it on the table in front of her. The moment her gaze landed on the screen, her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Everything inside her crumbled. And I knew, right then, that she had been just as blindsided as I was. She wasn't the mistress. She was the other wife. The front door clicked open. Footsteps. Daniel. I felt the shift in the air before I even saw him. A tension so thick it was suffocating. And then there he was. He walked in casually, keys in hand, a small smile on his lips, until his eyes met mine. Every ounce of color drained from his face. His breath caught, and for the first time in our 10 years together, I saw fear in his expression. Not nervousness, not guilt, pure, unfiltered fear. I watched him waiting for him to say something, to explain, but he didn't. Sarah's voice sliced through the silence, trembling with rage. Daniel, tell me she's lying. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And then, finally, he exhaled. Long and slow, like he was accepting something. Like the weight of all his secrets had finally come crashing down. His next words shattered me all over again. I was hoping you two would never meet. For a long, terrible moment, the three of us just stared at each other. Sarah, her hands trembling on the table. Daniel, frozen like a man caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. And me, sitting in the middle of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. His words echoed in my head. I was hoping you two would never meet. Not denying anything. Not apologizing. Just accepting that the secret was out. Something inside me snapped. I stood up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. That's all you have to say? My voice was sharp, cutting through the suffocating silence. No excuses? No begging for forgiveness. Sarah stood too, her face pale with shock. Daniel, what is this? Who is she? Because she's telling me she's your wife, and she has proof. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't scrambling for explanations. No, he was calculating, choosing his next move. I had spent 10 years thinking this man was the love of my life. I knew his habits, his favorite songs, the way he liked his coffee. But right now, watching him stand there like a stranger in his own home, I realized I had never known him at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. You both deserve the truth, he said. Sarah let out a hollow laugh. Oh, now we deserve the truth? Daniel ignored her. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time in my life, I felt uneasy under his gaze. I never meant for it to happen this way, he said. I thought I had everything under control. I stared at him in disbelief. Under control? He spoke about this like it was some business deal gone wrong, not 2 lives he had destroyed. Start talking, I demanded. Right now. And so, Daniel began his confession. 10 years ago he met me. Fell in love with me. Married me. That part wasn't a lie. But somewhere along the way, maybe during one of his long business trips, maybe during one of the cracks in our marriage I hadn't even noticed, he met Sarah. She was never supposed to be more than a passing affair. Just a moment of weakness. But then she got pregnant. And suddenly it wasn't just a mistake. It was a responsibility. So he made a decision. He couldn't leave me. He loved me. But he couldn't abandon Sarah and their daughter either. So instead of choosing one life, he chose both. 2 homes. 2 families. 2 versions of himself. And he lived like that for years, weaving between his 2 identities like a master illusionist, making sure neither of us ever saw the full picture. Until now. Until me. The weight of his words pressed down on me like 1,000 pounds. Sarah looked just as broken as I felt. You told me you weren't ready for marriage, she whispered, shaking her head. You said we'd get there one day. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. I thought I could keep everything separate, that no one would ever have to get hurt. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Oh, don't flatter yourself. We were always going to get hurt. His jaw tightened. Emily, I love you. No, I cut him off. You don't get to say that. Not anymore. His face darkened for just a second. It was subtle, so subtle that maybe I wouldn't have noticed it if I wasn't already looking for it. A flicker of something colder. I swallowed hard. You lied to us, Daniel. For years. He sighed again as if he was the one suffering here. I was trying to protect you both. Sarah let out a sharp, disbelieving breath. Protect us. From the truth, he said simply. The way he said it, the quiet confidence in his voice, sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't sorry. Not really. He was cornered. And something about that realization made my stomach turn. Sarah crossed her arms. And what now? You think we'll just accept this? That we'll keep pretending for you? Daniel hesitated. And that hesitation was all I needed to see. Because for the first time since this conversation started, it hit me. He did have a plan for when the truth came out. Before I could even process that thought, a soft voice interrupted us. Mommy? We all turned. The little girl, Daniel's daughter, stood in the doorway rubbing her sleepy eyes. She must have woken up from her nap. She looked at Sarah first, then at me. Then at Daniel. Why are you all yelling? She asked, her voice small. I saw it happen in real time, the way Daniel's entire demeanor shifted. One moment he was a man caught in his own twisted web of lies. The next, he was all warmth and gentleness, crouching down to her level with a soft smile. Hey sweetheart, he said. Everything's okay. The ease with which he switched personas made my skin crawl. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a man who had been lying. This was a man who had spent years perfecting it. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to his lies than just the two of us. Sarah picked up her daughter, smoothing down the little girl's curls as she held her close. Everything's fine, sweetheart, she murmured, though her voice shook. I watched the scene unfold like I was standing outside my own life. My head was spinning. My hands cold. Daniel had spent years lying to us, deceiving us. And now here he was acting like none of it mattered. Like we were all just pieces in a game he was still trying to control. No, not trying to control. Still confident he could control. His gaze flicked back to me and for a second I saw it again, that same flicker of something calculating behind his eyes. I forced myself to speak. So, what was your plan, Daniel? My voice was steadier than I expected. What were you going to do if I never found out? He stood up slowly. His face was unreadable. I would have kept everything the same, he admitted. You were both happy. Sarah let out a sharp breath, shaking her head in disbelief. Happy? Happy? He didn't even flinch. Something about his calmness made my stomach churn. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. And what about now? I asked. Now that we know? Daniel held my gaze and for the first time, I saw the full truth in his expression. He had already thought about this. He already had a plan. My pulse pounded in my ears. You're too calm, I whispered. Like you knew this would happen. Sarah froze. She looked between Daniel and me, her grip on her daughter tightening. Daniel didn't answer. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I needed to get out of there. I took a slow step back, my instincts screaming that something was very, very wrong. Daniel's eyes darkened just slightly. Emily, he said, his voice careful. I turned to Sarah. You should leave. Take your daughter. She hesitated, confused. What? Now? My voice was sharper than before. We need to go. Both of us. Daniel took a step forward. Emily, don't. I grabbed Sarah's wrist and pulled her toward the front door. She resisted at first, still processing, but something in my expression must have finally clicked. She nodded once and then we moved. Fast. I yanked open the door just as Daniel reached us. His hand grabbed my arm, tight, firm, almost desperate. Emily, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Think about this. I wrenched myself free. I am thinking, I said, for the first time in years. Sarah rushed past me, her daughter clinging to her side. She ran to her car, fumbling with the door. Daniel exhaled sharply and I could see it happening. The mask slipping. He wasn't worried about me leaving. He was worried about what I might find out next. My heart pounded as I turned away from him, running to my car. I didn't know what I was running from yet, but I had a terrible feeling I was about to find out. I don't remember driving home. One moment I was tearing down that quiet suburban street, my mind racing faster than my car. The next, I was standing in my kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Sarah had called me once on the way, voice shaking, asking what the hell just happened. I told her to stay put, stay safe, that I'd call her as soon as I figured out my next move. Because one thing was clear, I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. I was dealing with a man who had spent years crafting a lie so perfect, so intricate, that it took me a decade to even see the cracks. And that scared me more than anything. I needed answers. Real answers. Not the scripted confessions Daniel had given us. And if there was anyone who knew the parts of his life he hadn't told me about, it was the one person I had never thought to question. His mother. I called her before I had the chance to second-guess myself. She picked up on the second ring, her familiar warm voice filling the silence. "Emily, it's so good to hear from you, sweetheart. Are you and Daniel still on for dinner this weekend?" A sharp pain twisted in my chest. She had no idea. I forced myself to speak. "Actually, I need to ask you something." She hesitated, like she could hear the tension in my voice. "Of course. What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Did Daniel ever, before me, was he ever married? Or engaged?" Silence. A pause so long it made my pulse skyrocket. And then, finally, in a much quieter voice, "Emily," she said carefully, "why would you ask that?" A cold chill spread through me. Because that wasn't a no. I swallowed hard. "Please," I whispered. "I need the truth." Another pause. Then a shaky exhale. Daniel was different when he was younger. He always had this way of making people believe whatever he wanted them to. My hands tightened around the phone. "So it's true?" There was a long silence. Then finally, "Yes." I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. "Who was she?" Another pause. Her voice dropped even lower. "I don't know her real name," she admitted. "We only knew her as Anna." Anna. Not Sarah. Someone else. A third woman. A third life. My breath caught. "Where is she now?" And then, the words that made my blood run cold. "No one knows." I barely remember ending the call. My thoughts were spinning, nausea creeping up my throat. Daniel hadn't just lied to me. He had patterns. He had done this before. And if his mother was telling the truth, the last woman who was in my position disappeared without a trace. I stumbled back, gripping the counter, trying to steady myself. I needed to find out what happened to Anna, before I became her. My fingers trembled as I ended the call. My head was spinning. Daniel had done this before. And the last woman, Anna, was gone. I felt like the walls of my home were closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of the truth. Every framed picture of us, every love note he'd ever left, now felt like artifacts from a fictional life. I wasn't his first. I wasn't even his second. How many others had there been? And more importantly, where were they now? I had two options. I could run. Pack a bag, disappear, leave Daniel and his tangled web of lies behind. Or I could find out what happened to Anna. Because if Daniel had gone to such great lengths to hide her existence, it meant there was something he didn't want me to find. And that meant I had to find it. I sat down at my laptop and started searching. Anna missing woman, Oregon. Anna missing person, Portland. Anna missing after relationship. Nothing. No news articles, no police reports, no missing person bulletins. It was like she had never existed. But that didn't make sense. If Anna had truly disappeared, there had to be something. Some trace of her. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. There was another way to do this. If Daniel had a history of erasing his past, I needed to start closer to home. Somewhere he might have slipped up. Somewhere he wouldn't expect me to look. His office. Daniel kept a study in the house. An organized, locked room where he kept his legal files, tax documents, and God knows what else. He had never let me go through his things. Not because he was hiding anything he claimed, but because he liked order. Now I knew better. I grabbed the spare key from the kitchen drawer and walked down the hall, my pulse hammering in my ears. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room smelled like him. Faint cologne, fresh paper, the crisp scent of expensive wood. But I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here for answers. I started with the desk. Drawers, papers, legal contracts, all of it meticulously organized. But after digging through document after document, I found nothing suspicious. Until I opened the bottom drawer. It was locked. Of course it was. I bit my lip, my mind racing. I had never seen Daniel use a key for his drawers before. It had to be here somewhere. And then I remembered. Daniel always kept a spare key hidden in the bookshelf. He had told me once, offhandedly when we first moved in. just in case I ever forget where I put things. I reached behind the row of legal books and felt the cool edge of a key. Gotcha. I unlocked the drawer and pulled it open. Inside were folders, neatly stacked, perfectly arranged, and one of them, at the very bottom, was labeled A. Right? My stomach flipped. I pulled it out with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were documents, receipts, a marriage certificate. Daniel and Anna Wright. He had been married to her. I flipped through the papers, my hands moving faster, my breathing shallow. Bank statements. Large cash withdrawals. A deed to a house I didn't recognize. And then, at the very back of the folder, a death certificate. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Anna Wright. Deceased. Cause of death. Unknown. I dropped the papers, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Daniel's first wife wasn't just missing. She was dead. And my husband had been the last person to see her alive. I couldn't breathe. The death certificate trembled in my hands, the edges curling from the pressure of my grip. My mind screamed at me to process what I was seeing, but all I could do was stare at those cold, clinical words. Cause of death. Unknown. Anna Wright was dead. And Daniel, my Daniel, had been the last person in her life. A nauseating chill crept down my spine. I thought I had married a liar. A cheater. But now, for the first time, I had to ask myself, did I marry a killer? I forced myself to move. I stuffed the documents back into the folder, my pulse hammering. My instincts screamed at me to get out, to run, but I wasn't ready yet. Not until I knew how she died. And not until I knew if I was next. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking as I snapped quick photos of the documents. The death certificate, the bank records, the house deed, every single piece of paper that tied Daniel to a woman he had erased from history. Then, I did the only thing that made sense. I searched for her grave. There were no obituaries, no funeral announcements. No news articles about an Anna Wright's mysterious death. But one thing stood out. A burial record. Anna Wright. Deceased 2016. Resting place, Fairview Cemetery. It wasn't far. Just a 30-minute drive outside the city. My hands curled into fists. Daniel never mentioned having a wife before me. He never mentioned burying someone. If he thought he had hidden this from me, I needed to see for myself. The drive was a blur. The sky had darkened with thick clouds, the wind picking up as I pulled into the cemetery parking lot. The place was eerily empty, rows of weathered headstones stretching out before me. I stepped out of the car, hugging my coat tight as I made my way through the graves. Row 14, plot 26. That's what the record said. I walked faster, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. And then, I found it. A small, unremarkable headstone. Anna Wright, 1988 to 2016. Beloved wife. That was it. No flowers. No personal message. Just a name and 2 dates. Like someone had wanted her to be forgotten. My throat tightened. Anna, I whispered, kneeling beside the grave. What happened to you? The wind howled in response, but it wasn't the wind that sent a shiver down my spine. It was the feeling of being watched. I turned sharply, and my stomach dropped. A black car sat at the edge of the cemetery. Its engine was running, and inside, a man was watching me. Not just a man. Daniel. My breath caught in my throat. Daniel's car idled at the cemetery's entrance, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Even from a distance, I could feel his gaze locked on me. He wasn't moving, wasn't getting out, just watching. My hands curled into fists as I forced myself to stay still, to not react. If I ran now, I'd be telling him I was afraid, that I knew. So I did the only thing I could. I stood up, and I stared back. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The wind howled through the cemetery, sending dead leaves skittering across the gravestones. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears, my body screaming at me to do something. Then, Daniel's car door opened, slowly, deliberately. He stepped out, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. He didn't call my name, didn't demand to know what I was doing here. He just started walking toward me. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. As he approached, I turned slightly, just enough to make it look like I had been expecting him, like I wasn't unraveling inside. Daniel, I said smoothly. What a coincidence. His lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Is it? He stopped a few feet away from me, his hands slipping into his coat pockets. I could feel the weight of his gaze studying me. I was worried when I came home and you weren't there, he said casually. You weren't answering your phone. My phone. I had put it on silent during the drive. Had he called me? Or was that just an excuse? I tilted my head, matching his calm. I just needed some air. His eyes flicked to the gravestone beside me. And you ended up here? I didn't blink. Should I not be? A beat of silence. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it. You've been looking into things, haven't you? My blood turned to ice. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I let out a soft chuckle. You sound paranoid. His lips twitched, but there was no amusement in his eyes. Am I? The wind whipped between us, but the chill that crept down my spine had nothing to do with the cold. Because for the first time I saw it. The cracks in Daniel's mask. The real him peeking through. Not the loving husband. Not the charming lawyer. Not the man who left notes on the fridge. No, this was someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't worried about getting caught. Someone who was waiting to see what I'd do next. I forced a smile. I think I should head home. Daniel nodded, stepping aside as if he was giving me space. I'll drive behind you. A statement, not a question. I swallowed hard and turned toward my car, every nerve screaming at me not to turn my back on him. Not to run. Not to show fear. As I pulled out of the cemetery, my hands clenched around the wheel. I checked my rearview mirror. Daniel's car followed. Close. Too close. He wanted me to know that no matter where I went, no matter what I found, I wouldn't be alone. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Daniel's car stayed in my rearview mirror, his headlights casting an eerie glow in the dark. He wasn't just following me home. He was escorting me, like a predator walking its prey back to the cage. The drive felt endless, the silence in the car suffocating. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every moment over the past 10 years. Had I ever really known him? Had I ever been safe? The death certificate flashed in my mind. Anna Wright. Cause of death, unknown. I swallowed hard. I was running out of time. As I pulled into our driveway, my heart pounded against my ribs. Daniel's car eased in behind me, slow and deliberate. He didn't rush. Didn't act suspicious. To anyone watching, we were just a married couple coming home from a late night out. But I knew better. I wasn't stepping into my home. I was stepping into a trap. I slid my key into the lock and pushed the door open. The house was dark and eerily silent. Daniel followed me in, closing the door with a soft click. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, "You never answered my question," he said casually. I turned slowly, forcing a neutral expression. "What question?" Daniel leaned against the wall, studying me. "Why you were at that grave." My breath hitched. I couldn't tell the truth. Not yet. I forced a shrug. I saw a name that looked familiar in an old record. I was curious. Silence. Daniel's eyes flickered with something unreadable. And then, he smiled. The same charming, disarming smile he'd used for years. The same one that had made me fall in love with him. But now, it sent ice through my veins. "Curiosity," he murmured, stepping closer. "That's a dangerous thing." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, my body tense, listening for every sound, every movement. Daniel slept peacefully beside me, like nothing had changed. Like he wasn't hiding a dead wife in his past. Like he wasn't wondering how much I really knew. Or worse, if I was going to be a problem. By morning I had made a decision. I wasn't waiting to become Anna Wright. I was getting out. I moved carefully, slowly. I didn't pack a bag, that would be too obvious. Instead, I slipped my phone into my pocket and stepped into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I opened a new text thread and typed 3 words. "I need help." Then I sent it to Sarah. She was the only other person who knew the truth. The only person Daniel hadn't completely fooled. The response came almost immediately. "Where are you? What's wrong?" I swallowed hard and typed. "Meet me at the cafe near your house. 1 hour. Don't tell anyone." Then I deleted the conversation. No evidence. No trace. I glanced at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed. I wasn't Emily, the loving wife, anymore. I was a woman trying to escape something she didn't fully understand. And I had no idea if I was already too late. I slipped out of bed before dawn, my heartbeat thrumming in my ears. Daniel was still asleep, his breath slow and steady. I had memorized his patterns, when he stirred, when he rolled over, when his alarm went off. If I moved now, I had a window. A small one. I slid out of the bedroom and into the hallway, barefoot to avoid making a sound. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a cage. I grabbed my keys from the counter, tensing as they jingled softly. If Daniel woke up, it was over. I took a deep breath. And then I ran. The cafe was 10 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity. My hands trembled against the wheel, the weight of everything suffocating me. I wasn't just leaving. I was escaping. I pulled into the parking lot and spotted Sarah immediately. She was sitting at an outside table, eyes scanning the street nervously. When she saw me, she stood, her face pale. I barely had the car in park before I rushed to her. "I don't have a lot of time," I said quickly, glancing over my shoulder. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "What's going on? You scared me with that text." I hesitated, my throat dry. "Anna's dead." Sarah blinked. "What?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and showed her the photo of the death certificate. "I found this in Daniel's office. She didn't just disappear. She died." Sarah's face drained of color. "You're telling me?" "I don't know how she died. But Daniel buried her, Sarah. And he's been lying about it for years." I swallowed hard. "And I think he knows I'm looking into it." Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. "Emily, this is dangerous. If he... bzzzt." My phone vibrated. I looked down. "Daniel, one new message, where are you?" My stomach dropped. He was awake. And he knew I was gone. I shot a panicked look at Sarah. "I can't go back." Sarah nodded quickly. "Then we go to the police. Right now." Sounded so simple. Like running to the authorities would magically make everything safe. But then I thought about the documents. The perfectly erased history. Daniel was a lawyer. He knew how to cover his tracks. What if the police didn't believe me? What if I walked into that station and never walked out? I exhaled shakily. "I need proof. Real proof. Something they can't ignore." Sarah hesitated. "Like what?" I clenched my fist. "Like where he buried her." Sarah's eyes widened. "Emily, are you hearing yourself?" I looked at her, my voice deadly calm. "If we don't do this, he wins. And if he knows I know," I swallowed. "Then I could be next." Sarah pressed her lips together, conflicted. Then after a long moment, she nodded. "Okay, but we do this fast." I exhaled in relief. "I know where to start." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I had taken in Daniel's office. One of the documents had been a property deed, one that wasn't connected to our home. An old cabin. Off a secluded road. Owned by Daniel. I turned the screen toward Sarah. "I think this is where she is." Sarah's face paled as she stared at the screen. "A cabin?" she whispered. "You think?" "I don't think," I cut in. "I know." Daniel was too careful, too calculated. If Anna's death had been an accident, why was there no record of it? No obituary, no police report, nothing? Because he had erased her. And I was about to bring her back. We drove in silence, the air thick with unspoken fear. The road leading to the cabin was long and winding, swallowed by dense forest on either side. No streetlights. No houses. Just endless trees and darkness. The deeper we went, the more my stomach twisted. This was the perfect place to hide something. Or someone. Finally, we reached a rusted gate. A private property sign hung from it, barely legible under years of dirt and decay. "This is it," I whispered. Sarah swallowed hard. "I don't like this." I pushed open the gate, wincing as the metal groaned loudly. There was no going back now. The cabin loomed ahead, barely visible in the moonlight. It was small, old, the wood weathered and cracked. It looked abandoned, but I knew better. Daniel still owned this place, and that meant it wasn't empty. I reached the porch first, my pulse hammering. The door was locked, but the windows. I pressed my fingers against the nearest one. Unlocked. I slid it open and hoisted myself inside, landing softly on the wooden floor. Sarah hesitated before following, her breath shallow. The air was thick with dust, stale, like no one had been here in years. But something felt off. A presence. A weight in the air. Like the cabin itself was holding a secret. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The light swept across the room. An old couch. A wooden table. A fireplace. And then, footsteps. Not mine. Sarah stiffened beside me. I turned my light sharply. Nothing. Just a long, dark hallway leading deeper into the cabin. A chill crawled down my spine. Something was here. Or someone. We moved carefully, each step creaking beneath us. A door stood at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. The smell hit me first. Damp. Earthy. Like something rotting. My hands shook as I pushed the door open. And then, my blood ran cold. The room was small. Bare. Except for the trapdoor in the floor. A heavy wooden plank covering something beneath us. My stomach twisted violently. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Emily, don't." But I was already moving. I crouched down, fingers digging under the edge of the plank. And then, with one deep breath, I pulled. The smell hit first, then the sight. A hole. A deep, freshly disturbed hole. And inside, fabric. Torn. Buried beneath the dirt. And beneath that, bone. My heart stopped. Sarah gasped, stumbling back. Oh my God. Oh my God. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Daniel had buried someone here. And now, I knew too much. Then, the sound of tires on gravel. My blood went cold. Sarah's eyes snapped up to meet mine. We weren't alone anymore. Daniel was here. The sound of tires on gravel sent a bolt of terror through my chest. Sarah's breathing turned ragged. Emily, we have to go. Now. But I couldn't move. Not yet. My flashlight beam trembled as I aimed it back at the hole. The fabric, the bones, this was proof. Proof that Daniel had done something terrible. I had spent days searching for answers. Now they were staring me in the face. And so was Daniel. A car door slammed outside. Sarah yanked my arm. Emily. Reality snapped back into place. We had seconds. I scrambled to my feet, my pulse hammering. My first instinct was to run for the door, but what if he saw us? No. The window. I grabbed Sarah's wrist and pulled her toward the hallway. Every step felt like a gunshot in the silence. Then, creak. The front door swung open. Sarah and I froze. Daniel's voice drifted inside, calm and controlled. Emily? My stomach twisted. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He was hunting. Sarah's fingers dug into my arm. We edged toward the nearest window, just a few more steps and we could climb out, disappear into the woods. But then, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. I squeezed Sarah's hand. Silently counted to 3. And then, we ran. Sarah dove through the window first, her body hitting the dirt outside with a muffled thud. I wasn't so lucky. The second my feet left the floor, a hand clamped around my ankle. I choked on a scream as Daniel yanked me back inside. I hit the ground hard, my phone slipping from my grasp. The flashlight skidded across the floor, the beam landing directly on his face. And that was the first time I saw it. The mask was gone. The loving husband. The charming lawyer. All of it had been a performance. This man, this thing holding me down, was something else entirely. Something cold, calculated, and completely soulless. Sarah's voice rang from outside. Emily. I thrashed, kicking wildly. My heel connected with Daniel's jaw, and his grip loosened just enough for me to break free. I scrambled to my feet, lunging for the window, and then Daniel's voice, low and sharp. You don't understand what you're doing. I hesitated, just for a second. And in that second, Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a gun. My blood turned to ice. Daniel raised it with terrifying ease, his hand steady. Emily, he said softly, you need to stop. My chest heaved. Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to move. But I couldn't. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could see was the barrel of that gun. And then, Sarah. Hey, Daniel. A rock came flying through the window. It struck Daniel square in the temple. He staggered back, cursing. And I ran. I vaulted through the window, hitting the ground in a mess of dirt and adrenaline. Sarah grabbed my hand and we bolted into the woods. Behind us, a gunshot. The bullet whizzed past my ear, so close I felt the heat of it. Sarah screamed. Daniel's voice echoed through the trees. You can't run forever, Emily. But we weren't running forever. We were running straight to the police. Daniel had spent years covering his tracks. But now I had something he couldn't erase. I had his grave. I had his secrets. And if I made it out of these woods alive, I was going to bury him. Branches whipped against my arms as Sarah and I sprinted through the woods, our lungs burning with every breath. Behind us, footsteps. Fast, steady. Daniel wasn't panicking. He wasn't rushing. He was stalking. A second gunshot ripped through the silence. The bullet struck a tree just inches from my head. Splinters exploded outward, slicing into my skin. Sarah shrieked. He's trying to kill us. I grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward. Faster. But deep down I knew we couldn't outrun him. Not forever. Up ahead the woods thinned. A road. A chance. If we could reach it, we could flag someone down, get to the police. Another gunshot. Sarah stumbled. She hit the ground with a hard thud, her leg buckling beneath her. My heart stopped. I dropped beside her, my hands shaking. Sarah? Her breath came in ragged gasps. I think he hit me. I looked down. A dark stain spread across her jeans. Daniel had shot her. Crunch. A footstep. close. Too close. I turned my head and locked eyes with Daniel. He stood just 20 feet away, gun in hand, his silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. His expression was unreadable. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even worried. Just calm. Like he knew how this would end. Like he knew I had nowhere left to go. "Emily," he called softly. "Enough." My hand shook. I looked down at Sarah, her face pale, her breath shallow. If I didn't do something now, she was going to bleed out. I clenched my fist. "No," I whispered. Daniel sighed, tilting his head. "You don't understand, do you?" I stood. His grip on the gun tightened. "You were never supposed to know about Anna," he said. "I was protecting you." My blood boiled. "Protecting me?" His voice remained calm. "If you had just let it go, we wouldn't be here." A light flickered in the distance. Headlights. A car. Hope exploded in my chest. Daniel saw it too. His jaw tensed. I had one shot. I turned and ran straight for the road. Daniel cursed, raising the gun. I heard the click of the trigger. I dove. Bang. The bullet ripped through the air. And then, screech. Tires screamed against pavement. A car skidded to a stop just inches from me. Bright headlights blinded Daniel. And in that moment, he hesitated. That was all I needed. I lunged for Sarah, grabbing her under the arms. The driver, an older man, jumped out of the car. "Jesus Christ. Are you okay?" I shouted. "Call the police. He has a gun." The man fumbled for his phone, panic spreading across his face. Daniel took a single step forward, then stopped. His eyes met mine. And for the first time, I saw something new. Not anger, not control, but realization. He had lost. Red and blue lights flooded the road. Sirens howled through the night. Daniel's grip on the gun loosened. Then, he ran. 3 police cars screeched onto the scene. Officers poured out, shouting commands, guns drawn. "Get down. Hands up." But Daniel was already disappearing into the trees. A cop ran to me, his voice urgent. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head wildly, pointing at Sarah. "She's been shot. Help her." Paramedics rushed in, loading Sarah onto a stretcher. I barely heard their voices. My eyes were still locked on the dark woods. Daniel was still out there, and I had a terrifying feeling. This wasn't over. Daniel was gone. The moment the sirens came, he disappeared into the trees, swallowed by the darkness like he'd never been there at all. But I knew better. He was still out there, watching, waiting, planning, and I wasn't about to let him slip away. Sarah was rushed to the hospital. The bullet had grazed her leg, painful but not fatal. She'd be okay. I should have gone with her. I should have let the cops handle it. But I couldn't, because if Daniel got away tonight, I knew he would never stop hunting me. So I did something reckless. I ran back into the woods, alone. The police were still searching the area, but they were too slow. They were calling in K9 units, setting up roadblocks, but Daniel knew how to disappear. If they didn't catch him now, they never would. So I followed the only clue I had. The cabin. The forest was silent. No wind. No crickets. Just the sound of my own breathing. I gripped the flashlight tight, my hands trembling. Every shadow felt like a trap. Every branch that cracked under my feet sounded too loud. But I kept moving, because deep down I could feel it. Daniel was here, waiting for me. The cabin loomed ahead, dark and silent. I approached slowly, forcing my breath to stay steady. My fingers curled around the door handle. And then, a voice. "Oh, come." Right behind me. "You should have stayed away, Emily." My heart stopped. I turned slowly. Daniel stood just a few feet away, his face partially hidden by shadows. His clothes were dirty, his hair wild, but his eyes? His eyes were calculating. I forced myself to stand tall. "It's over, Daniel." He tilted his head, smirked. "No, it's not." The gun was gone. Maybe he dropped it when he ran. Maybe he was out of bullets. But that didn't make him any less dangerous. He took a step forward. "You don't get it, do you?" I stood my ground. "Get what?" "That you and I were the same." I laughed. A bitter, shaking sound. "You really believe that?" His smirk didn't fade. "You chased me, Emily. Just like I would have chased you." Something cold slithered down my spine. Because he wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being about justice. And it became something else. Something darker. Something personal. A twig snapped behind me. Daniel's gaze flicked past me. Too late, I realized. It was a distraction. Daniel lunged. I barely had time to react before his hands wrapped around my throat. I fought. scratched at his arms, kicked wildly. But he was strong. Too strong. Black spots danced in my vision. My lungs burned. And for the first time I thought, this is how I die. Then, a voice. Sure. Commanding. Freeze. Hands up. The pressure on my throat vanished. I gasped for air, stumbling back as flashlights flooded the clearing. Daniel whirled around, just as the cops swarmed him. He ran. Of course he ran. But this time, he wasn't fast enough. A cop tackled him to the ground. Daniel fought, thrashed, tried to break free. But there were too many of them. Within seconds they had him pinned, cuffed, and completely powerless. For the first time Daniel looked up at me, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw fear. Not for what he had done, but for what came next. An officer pulled me aside. You okay? I nodded, voice raw. Yeah. I looked back at Daniel, now being dragged toward a police car. Our eyes met one last time, and I smiled, because I finally understood something. He had spent years controlling people, manipulating them, winning. But in the end, he had lost, and I had won. Daniel was gone. Sarah was safe. And me? I could finally breathe again. Daniel was behind bars. They took him away that night, his face blank, his body stiff as they loaded him into the back of a police car. No fight left in him. The police had everything, the grave we found, the bodies, the evidence buried in the cabin. It wasn't just a second family. It wasn't just an affair. Daniel was a killer. The next few days were a blur of interrogations, statements, and nightmares. I barely slept. Sarah was recovering in the hospital, her leg bandaged, her voice hoarse from crying. She had lived a lie just like I had. We both had. And now we were left to pick up the pieces. The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutors painted Daniel as a cold, calculated murderer. And when the truth finally came out, it shattered everything. Daniel had been hiding more than just a double life. The bodies in the grave? They weren't random. They were his old mistakes. People who had gotten too close to the truth. People like Sarah's sister. People like the private investigator I never knew I hired. When Daniel finally spoke in court, his words haunted me. He didn't beg for mercy. He didn't try to defend himself. He just looked at me and said, "You should have never found out." It took the jury less than an hour to convict him. Life in prison. No parole. Forever. Sarah and I sat in the courtroom together as they dragged him away. She turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" I exhaled slowly, and for the first time in weeks I finally had an answer. We start over. Daniel thought he could control everything. He thought he could keep his secrets buried. But in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it does, it destroys everything in its path. But for Sarah and me, it also set us free.